My name is Emily Harper. Once upon a time, I was the forgotten daughter, cast out at 21, erased from my family's story as if I never existed. They didn't just turn their backs on me, they acted like I was a stain they had to scrub away to keep their image clean. But today, I stand as the governor of Colorado. And no, this isn't some tale of revenge or a dramatic comeback where I triumphantly throw my success in their faces. This story isn't about them, it's about the ashes I was left with and the quiet, grueling way I rebuilt myself from the ground up. People often assume I must have held on to anger, that bitterness must have fueled me. But truthfully, what got me here wasn't rage. It was clarity. It was learning how to stand still in pain and still choose to move forward. I didn't want to prove them wrong, I just wanted to prove to myself that I was still worth something, even when the people who raised me said otherwise. But to understand the full picture, I have to take you back. Back to where it all began to fall apart. Back to the night when the lights went out in my world, and everything I thought I could count on crumbled at my feet. Because this isn't just a political journey. This is personal. And it starts in the dark. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. The day my family turned away. 15 years ago, I was 21, fresh out of college with a literature degree in hand, full of quiet hope. I had studied in San Antonio, Texas, and I remember feeling both liberated and terrified as I stood on that graduation stage. But even then, I knew I wasn't the daughter my family wanted me to be. My father, James Harper, was a highly respected former federal judge. My mother, Margaret, lived for social appearances and family reputation. And then there was my sister, Olivia, older by 8 years, already a driven, sharp-edged prosecutor with a knack for winning impossible cases. The Harper family prided itself on precision, discipline, and control. I didn't fit the mold. I loved poetry, sketched when I couldn't sleep, and dreamed of worlds where rules didn't cage people in but invited them to breathe. To my family, I was the dreamer, the impractical one. They said it with exasperation, sometimes a little pity, never affection. But I never saw that as a flaw. I thought I was simply trying to live a life that felt true to who I was. Then the storm came. Started with a video, a cruel, blurry clip from spring break during my junior year. It was private. I never knew Ryan had recorded it. He'd been my boyfriend at the time, but we had ended things badly. I thought it was over. Apparently, he thought otherwise. Out of some twisted desire for revenge, he leaked the video online. Overnight, I went from being a quiet literature graduate to a scandal. My name became a dirty search term. It was Olivia who found it first. I'll never forget the way she handled it. No warning, no call to ask if I was okay. She forwarded the video link to our father with a cold message that read, "Handle this before it becomes public." No one called me. No one asked what happened. No one even acknowledged that I had been violated, that my privacy had been shattered without consent. In their eyes, I wasn't a victim. I was a stain on the Harper name. My father burst into my room like a storm, face flushed with rage. He didn't ask a single question. "Do you think we raised you to become this?" he roared, slamming my diploma onto the floor. The frame cracked as it hit the wood. "You disgrace the Harper legacy." I tried to explain. My voice trembled. I didn't post it. I didn't even know he recorded it. I'm the victim here. He wasn't listening. He never really did. My mother stood in the hallway, her rosary beads clenched so tightly in her hands that her knuckles turned white. She didn't say a word. Her eyes stayed glued to the floor as if even looking at me would contaminate her soul. Olivia stood there, arms crossed, completely unmoved, like a prosecutor reviewing an open and shut case. Her gaze told me everything. You are a problem. You brought this on yourself. We don't have space for your mistakes. That night, I was thrown out. No trial. No discussion. They packed a small duffel bag with my clothes and left it on the porch. My mother didn't hug me goodbye. She didn't even come outside. It was as if I had died, and this was how they disposed of my remains, quietly, quickly, without ceremony. I stood under the burning amber sky of San Antonio, holding onto my red backpack and a few articles of clothing. My notebook was zipped inside, pages filled with poems, sketches, and dreams. I felt strangely calm. There were no tears, only emptiness. Quiet, hollow ache like something inside me had been carved out. That was the day I stopped being a Harper. Rebirth from ashes. I left San Antonio on a Greyhound bus with no destination, just an overwhelming urge to disappear. I needed a place where no one knew my name. No whispers. No shame. Just the silence of strangers. I ended up in Denver. The city was brutal in winter. Cold seeped through the thin walls of the rundown apartment I found. The ceilings leaked. The floor creaked. The heater coughed more than it warmed. My neighbors argued through the walls, their voices seeping into my sleep. I worked 3 jobs. Mornings were for waiting tables at a cramped diner where customers barely looked at me. Afternoons, I scrubbed bathrooms and emptied trash bins at a local hospital. Nights, I entered shipment data for a freight company. My fingers ached from typing, my back from standing, and my heart from pretending none of it hurt. One night, after another shift that left me bone-tired, I stood in front of the mirror in my tiny bathroom. The light flickered overhead. I picked up a pair of scissors and cut off my hair. It wasn't dramatic, just necessary. With every strand that fell, I shed another part of who I used to be. I changed my name legally to Emma Hart. It was close enough to remember where I came from, but far enough to protect me from who I used to be. Emily Harper had died on that porch in Texas. Emma was who survived. I began keeping a journal again, but this time in a secret code I'd made up as a child, symbols and phrases only I understood. It was the only way I could speak honestly without fear. My real thoughts. My raw pain. My dreams, though quieter now, still flickered on the page. I painted too. Not often, paint was expensive, but sometimes. Once, I used an old toothbrush and a $3 set of acrylics to create a portrait of a woman dissolving into shadow. I hung it in the corner of the room. It wasn't beautiful, but it was honest. And it reminded me that even fading things have form. There were nights I fell asleep fully dressed, the blanket barely covering me. Nights I skipped dinner to make rent. Nights I wondered if anyone had even noticed I was gone. But I kept going. Each morning I told myself, one more day, one more reason to keep breathing. In that season of exile, I discovered a kind of quiet strength. I learned that surviving doesn't always look heroic. Sometimes it's just getting up, showing up, refusing to let the darkness swallow you whole. I didn't know it then, but those days, those lonely, humiliating, exhausting days, were where I built the version of myself who would one day run for office. The woman who would speak for others who had been silenced. The governor who would rise not because she was powerful, but because she had once been powerless and chose not to stay that way. But before I could become her, I had to walk through the fire. And that fire began the day my family turned away. The turning point. Everything changed on an ordinary night during my graveyard shift at the hospital. I was scrubbing the floors in the north wing when I heard frantic shouting in Spanish echo down the hallway. I followed the noise, instincts pulling me before my mind could catch up. There she was. A young woman, barely older than me, pressed against the cold wall, her arms wrapped protectively around a small child who couldn't have been more than 4. The little girl was sobbing uncontrollably, clinging to her mother's leg with both arms. The woman's name, I later learned, was Maria. Her cheeks were wet with tears, her voice hoarse from pleading. A man in a dark uniform towered over them, holding a clipboard and barking orders. He was from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. He kept shoving a document toward her, pressuring her to sign. Deportation papers. I had no legal authority, no training, no plan. But something inside me ignited. I stepped forward, my hands trembling, voice shaking but firm. "She's not signing that. Your paperwork's outdated." It was a lie. I had no idea if that was true. I said it anyway. He looked stunned, thrown off by the confidence in my voice. For a second, I thought he might call security or report me. But he didn't. He stepped back, muttered something under his breath, and walked away. Maria collapsed to her knees, clutching her daughter like a lifeline. She looked up at me with eyes full of disbelief, gratitude, and pain I can't begin to describe. She didn't say much, just gracias, but that look, it has never left me. That was the night something in me shifted. That was the night I stopped surviving and started fighting. A few days later, I was called into an office I didn't recognize. I thought it was trouble. Maybe someone had reported the incident. I expected a warning or worse, termination. Instead, I found myself sitting across from Rafael Torres, director of Hope Rising, a local nonprofit that supported immigrant families. He offered me water. I declined. He smiled kindly. "Most people wouldn't have done what you did," he said. "You weren't scared of losing your job?" I laughed, a little bitterly. I didn't have much left to lose. He nodded, as if he understood more than he let on. "I think you should work for us," he said. "Not as a cleaner, though I respect anyone who cleans. But we need someone who shows up, who sees people." I stared at him, stunned. "You'd start small. A runner helping with documents, scheduling, errands. But we'll teach you everything. If you want to learn, we'll invest in you." I accepted on the spot. That moment changed the trajectory of my life. Hope Rising, I was surrounded by people who didn't just talk about justice, they practiced it. I learned how to write grant proposals, how to coordinate outreach programs, how to speak with policymakers. I studied immigration law, read statutes late into the night, my dictionary and laptop open beside me on my thrifted desk. I also went back to school, online, late hours after work. I studied public policy, governance, human rights. No one knew who I used to be. To them, I was just Emma Hart, quiet, hardworking, invisible in the best way. I didn't talk about my past. It was easier that way. I attended city council meetings in Denver. I sat in the back, took notes, learned how people moved in rooms of power, who listened, who interrupted, who stayed silent. Slowly, I began to speak up. Not loud, not showy, just precise, direct. I still didn't call any place home. I rented tiny apartments, lived out of boxes, never decorated the walls. But inside Hope Rising, inside those conversations, those late nights, those small wins, I began to build something. Not a house, not a name, a sense of belonging. Climb to power. 10 years passed. I was no longer sleeping in someone's car or burning my journals under bridges to hide from my history. I had built something quiet, steady, lasting. I had become Emma Hart, a trusted advisor on Denver's Immigrant Policy Board. I wasn't flashy, but people listened. Because when I spoke, it wasn't theory. It was truth. Lived experience. Grounded conviction. 35, I filed to run for state representative in Colorado. Independent. No party ties. No family name to back me. My campaign was simple. I didn't use personal photos. I didn't lean on empty slogans. Just one line on every flyer, every poster. Let the work speak. People laughed at first. No machine, no donors, no family. You don't stand a chance. I didn't argue. I canvassed neighborhoods people usually ignored. Talked to single mothers, factory workers, janitors, immigrants, veterans, kids who had aged out of foster care. I listened more than I spoke. And I won. I didn't win because I had charisma. I won because people saw something of themselves in me. Quiet fire. A promise that someone who had been locked out might hold the door open next time. I wasn't done. 4 years later, I ran for governor. No one saw it coming. Even some of my closest allies thought I was aiming too high. But I had seen the system from the bottom. I knew where the cracks were. And I had no patience for people who sat comfortably while others drowned in bureaucracy. The night I won the election, I didn't celebrate. I sat in my living room alone, still wearing the same gray sweater I'd worn since morning, and I lit a small candle. Beside it was an old photo, my family's last holiday picture before everything collapsed. My face had been scratched out with a coin, probably by Olivia or my mother. I'd found it years ago in a box of things they'd mailed back, long after they disowned me. I never repaired the photo. I just kept it. And every time I looked at it, I whispered the same thing. Be remembered for what you do, not for what they called you. No one in Colorado politics knew that Emma Hart had once been Emily Harper, the girl who got kicked out, humiliated, cast off like trash. I didn't hide it because I was ashamed. I hid it because I didn't want my past to define my impact. My work was about those who were left out, those who were silenced, ignored, or erased. People like Maria. People like me. In every room I entered, I remembered the hospital hallway, the child crying, the ICE officer stepping back. The moment I said no, started there. That was my turning point. And every step forward since then has been about more than survival. It's been about reclaiming voice, dignity, and power without ever needing to shout. The day I returned, it all came crashing down when Olivia, now the district attorney of Behar County, was placed under investigation for evidence tampering in an immigration case. The press called it a betrayal of justice. Headlines splashed her name across front pages, and pundits argued over how someone so trusted could fall so far. I didn't make a public statement. I booked a last-minute flight to San Antonio. No entourage, no security detail. Just a plain navy coat, dark sunglasses, and silence. I arrived in the city I once called home like a ghost slipping back into a story I no longer belonged to. No press conference. No press at all. Just me walking the halls of the old courthouse I used to pass as a teenager. I sat in the very last row of the courtroom, quiet, still, watching. The front stood Olivia. Same sharp suits. Same stiff posture. But the confidence was cracked. The weight of scrutiny sat heavily on her shoulders. Her license to practice law was on the line. Prison time wasn't off the table. Then the judge entered, Judith Carter. A brilliant black woman known for her piercing intellect and unwavering sense of justice. I had met her once years ago at a policy summit. I had admired her then. She scanned the room, and then her gaze landed on me. Her brows rose slightly. She paused. Then, clearly and calmly, she asked, "Wait, is that Governor Emily Harper?" The entire courtroom turned. Cameras clicked. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks. Olivia's jaw dropped. My mother paled. My father squinted as if trying to see through a fog that didn't make sense. I didn't speak. I didn't smile. I didn't react. I wasn't there to rescue Olivia. I wasn't there for redemption or spectacle. I was there to witness. to sit in the room they once forced me out of, to face the ghosts that had chased me for too long. I walked out of the courthouse the same way I entered, quietly, alone. By the time I reached my hotel room, my phone was flooded with voicemails and text messages from reporters, aides, old classmates, strangers. Everyone wanted a statement. I gave none. I sat by the window, looking out over the city I once thought I'd never return to. I realized something that surprised me. I didn't feel rage or satisfaction, just distance. I was no longer the girl begging to be heard. I wasn't a shadow anymore. The media storm. Within 24 hours, everything erupted. Press, hungry for drama, began digging into my past. They found the old video. They unearthed private emails from a college server. They published a photo of me years ago, curled up outside a Denver shelter, crying under flickering lights. A blog posted a headline in all caps: "The Dark Past of Governor Harper." And then came Ryan. My ex-boyfriend, the one who started it all, crawled out from whatever hole he'd been hiding in to appear on television. With forced remorse, he said, "We were young. I didn't think things would spiral like that. I never meant to hurt her." He smiled softly, like he deserved applause for his empty regret. But I didn't flinch. I had survived worse than headlines. I had survived silence, humiliation, exile. And now I had armor forged from everything they once tried to bury me with. The media couldn't tear me down. They had already watched me rise from the rubble. Then my phone rang. It was my father. His voice was cold, clipped, the same tone he used the night he threw me out. "You're using our family name for attention," he accused. "Dragging our legacy through the mud." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't let him bait me. I answered calmly. "I never used the Harper name to climb. I kept it to remind myself never to become like you." He hung up. No goodbye. Just a click. A few days later, I received word that my mother had been hospitalized, hypertension, brought on by stress. Despite everything, I flew back. Not for closure. Not for reconciliation. Just because. She looked smaller than I remembered, frail, tired, nothing like the polished woman who once stood at the front door, watching me walk away with a bag and no home to return to. She reached for my hand with weak fingers. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "If any of what they're saying is true, then I understand why I didn't see you all those years." I didn't cry. I didn't speak of forgiveness. I simply held her hand quietly as the machines beeped and the room fell into soft, sterile silence. Before I left, I placed something on the table beside her bed, a small painting I had made years ago. It showed a woman standing alone in a desert, her shadow long behind her, stretching into the unknown. The bottom, one word was scrawled in pencil: "Witness." I walked out of that hospital lighter, not because wounds had healed, but because I no longer needed them to. I had long stopped searching for an apology that would never come. I didn't need their guilt. I didn't need their acceptance. What I needed, I had already found within myself, within the people I had fought for, and within every moment I chose integrity over resentment. They could keep their story. I was writing mine. And the world was watching now, facing and letting go. 15 years. That's how long it had been since I sat at my family's dinner table. They invited me back, formally, awkwardly, like a political gesture rather than a reunion. I accepted, not out of hope, but because I needed to see it through, to face what was left. The house looked the same, but in my eyes it had shrunk. The furniture that once seemed grand now felt tired. Polished wooden floors no longer gleamed with power. It wasn't the house that had changed. I had. Olivia was the first to speak after dinner was served. She admitted it softly, almost with a kind of shame that still carried pride. "I was jealous of you." She paused. "I made mistakes." Our mother tried to spin memories into stories, as if nostalgia could patch over years of silence. My father complimented my campaign with a strange formality, his voice caught between admiration and calculation. And then it came, the real reason for the dinner. They wanted help. They wanted me, the daughter once erased, to intervene on Olivia's behalf. Use my power. Pull strings. Make things go away. I stood up slowly, looked at each of them. If I weren't the governor, I asked quietly, would I even be considered family? No one spoke. Not even Olivia. I didn't wait for an answer. I pushed back my chair and walked out of that house, out of their carefully arranged second chance, without once looking back. The media storm hadn't ended. If anything, it had evolved. My father, ever the tactician, tried to leak stories about me through back channels. He reached out to old acquaintances, hoping to control the narrative. But I had stopped playing defense a long time ago. Instead, I stepped forward. At a press event in Denver, held in a gallery space lined with artwork created by immigrant children I had once worked with, I announced the Justice Witness Protection Act, a policy designed to protect government officials and witnesses from coercion or manipulation by family or close associates. I never said a single name. I didn't have to. The meaning was clear. Press shifted from scandal to admiration. Headlines began to change. Governor Harper redefines power with purpose. From outcast to architect of reform. But I wasn't chasing praise. I was building something I wished had existed when I was younger, something for the ones still fighting to be seen. Ending a legacy. Months later, I stood before a packed hall at a national conference on family justice reform. The audience was full of people who, like me, knew what it meant to be betrayed by the people who should have protected them. Lawyers, survivors, advocates, teachers. Some sat with arms folded, guarded. Others leaned forward, waiting for something honest. I told my story. The real one. Not the press release. Not the headline. The wounds. The silence. The exile, and the choice to rise anyway. My mother sat in the second row, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. My father was at the back, still and quiet, stripped of the authority he once carried like armor. Olivia didn't attend, but we left a chair with her name on it. Not as a symbol of shame, but as a reminder. Some seats are left empty by choice. That night, I announced the Family Transparency Act, a new bill protecting those who speak out against wrongdoing within their families, even when the stakes are personal, painful, or political. The room went silent. Then the applause began, slow, steady, swelling like a tide. Not for me, but for the idea that truth doesn't have to be sacrificed to bloodlines. 6 months later, at a modest community center in Denver, I gave a talk about what I called uncompromising leadership. During the candid, a woman stood and asked gently, "If your family changed, would you forgive them?" I didn't hesitate. "They're free to tell their story," I said. "But I've already told mine, and I won't rewrite it." From the back of the room, I saw him, my father. For the first time, he didn't look at me with disappointment. There was no judgment in his eyes, only something quieter. Maybe recognition. Maybe surrender. He stepped up to the mic. His voice was hoarse but steady. "I never understood my daughter," he said. "But today, I see what she's done. Things I never could." I nodded. Not to forgive. Not to heal old wounds, just to close the chapter. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft, early flakes drifting in the pale light. I stepped out into the cold alone, but I wasn't lonely. Once I lived just to be seen. Now I had learned to see myself. Some battles we fight quietly, but the greatest victory is knowing exactly where you stand. And sometimes standing alone is where something unbreakable begins. 5 lessons I learned after being erased by my own family. Your past does not define your worth. What others use to shame you can become your strength if you choose to reclaim it. Silence is not peace. Real healing begins the moment you stop pretending you're okay and start speaking your truth. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes the people who support you, believe in you, and stand beside you are the ones you find along the way. Power without integrity is hollow. True leadership begins when you fight not for titles, but for those who've been silenced. Forgiveness is not owed, it's earned. Closure doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it's just choosing to walk forward without bitterness. If Emily's journey moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that you're not alone, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Someone out there might need this story today. And maybe that someone is you.